Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Mythgard Academy. This is our Morte d'Arthur class still now. What we're in session number 18. Yes, session 18 this evening. Um, and because I see a couple people are teasing me for starting so early. I started less than 5 minutes late, which seems terribly early. The answer to your questions about why we're starting so early is that people went to bed at a much more reasonable hour in a much more compliant fashion this evening than usual. That's pretty much the cooperativeness of my children is about pretty much always the answer to that question, the primary determining factor of the degree of lateness of these classes. Anyway, so how are you guys this evening? Really glad to be. Oh, see, again, I almost did that same thing again, where I'm like, glad to be back, but like, of course, like I haven't missed anything, right? We were here last week, but of course, it's been an eventful week since I've been with you guys last. I've been down to Charlotte for Magnolia Moot, which was absolutely delightful. What a wonderful gathering. We had a sort of we had a smaller number at Magnolia Moot, but wow, it was like the all-star team. So many people I was super excited to meet down there at Magnolia Moot. Really, really wonderful conversations. Really, really great time. So yeah. Anyway, really great to see folks, and we talked a little bit about Malory stuff. We talked more about exploring the Lord of the Rings stuff actually, but still, anyway, it was really good. It was a really great weekend. And I just have so Tomas is hoping the New England Moot is coming soon. Well, it depends on whether you call all time soon or not. It will be coming. That is, more details will be forthcoming soon. The mood itself is still a little bit of a ways away. You may remember that when I mentioned Tomas, or when I announced the New England Moot, that we were kind of debating whether to try to squeeze it into the spring or whether to do it perhaps later on in the year, next year. And we've decided on the later on in the year. So we're gonna hold it in probably in September, actually, hoping to be right around Bilbo and Frodo's birthday next year, actually. So we'll have a nice little autumnal New England moot next September, probably. Date not yet confirmed on that, so I can't be very definite, but that's the general plan. So Tomas, it's getting sooner in the sense of being more and more concretely planned. But anyway, yeah, so that's gonna be really fun. But of course, the one that is getting sooner, like I was about to say, getting sooner more quickly, but of course they're all getting closer at the same rate. But the one that is soonest of all of them, of course, now is Tex Moot. Tex Moot is the moot that's coming up next. We have a bit of a moot hiatus, right? And that is, having gone to moots every 2 weeks for the last month and a half or so, it seems strange to wait 2 months for the next moot, but so it is. Our next moot is not until January 19th, to be precise. Will be Tex Moot down in Waco, Texas. It's going to be a lot of fun. Deborah, really glad you're going to be there. I'm hoping to get to meet a bunch more people this year at Tex Moot. So anyway, there's actually a very relevant announcement that I wanted to make about that, though, and that is that the call for papers for Tex Moot is closing, I think, this weekend, actually. Tex Moot people are super organized, and anyway, so they're all over things. So they actually are closing their call for papers, which they released a long time ago. Anyway, that's closing this weekend. So I hope that if you're interested in presenting at Tex Moot, definitely wanted to draw your attention to that. You can go to texmoot.org and find the call for papers there, along with the contact information, the submission information there. So I hope you will take a look at that. I'm really interested. Of course, the topic this year for Tex Moot is right up my alley. We're talking. It's about audio culture, actually, like oral culture, and sort of it's a great audiophiles topic. I'm going to be on a panel talking about podcasting and just sort of the whole process of kind of transforming really sort of my own kind of publication route as a scholar into a completely oral medium, essentially, and talking about that and the effects of that. So anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun as a dedicated and increasingly, as I get older, passionate audiophile. I'm going to be very interested to hear a bunch of things that people have to say about that. Stephen, is there a date for Nadermoot, the Netherlands moot, yet? There is, which I think I can announce. April 13th is the date that we're looking at. Until like we open registration, like there's always the chance for change, but that's what we're looking at right now. And I think that's pretty solid now. April 13th, the date for Nadermoot. So yeah, great question there. And Orlando Moot, which I think we're going to call Sunshine Moot. Of course, as you may remember, we were talking about it. If you heard me talking about this in the webathon, I kind of really like the idea of calling it Gator Moot, which would be kind of fun. But then I realized we're actually going to be holding it quite near the campus of the University of Florida, which might seem like false advertising. Like, if we call it Gator Moot right there near the campus of the University of Florida, which for those of you who don't know, the Gators, of course, is their I almost said motto, their mascot. It would kind of look like false advertising as if it were actually officially put on by the University of Florida, which of course it isn't. So we can't really call it Gator Moot. But anyway, Sunshine Moot is the name that the organizers wanted. So I was like, okay, you know what? Like, that works. Anyway, so we're going to be there. And that's going to happen in March. It's looking like the 23rd of March is the likeliest date for Sunshine Moot down there in Orlando. Anyway, lots of fun things coming up. Don't forget about the call for papers for Tex Moot. Again, our next big moot event. Also, speaking of big moot events, of course, the big moot events compared with which all other moot events pale is Myth Moot, our annual large convention, the full banquet for which our regional moots are but merely a taste. And Myth Moot is the dates you can save there are from June 27th, 6th, 7th, June 27th through the 30th. If I have my dates right, I think Thursday through Sunday of that week. So the last weekend of June. So you can kind of be saving the date for Myth Moot, which is more than 4 times as awesome as the regional moots. So anyway, lots of fun stuff in the future calendar coming forward. We now have definitely 9 moots scheduled for the calendar year 2019, which is kind of what we're just sort of reviewing this. Some of us in the Signum staff were just reviewing it earlier today, and just kind of, I think it was really the first time I saw them list it all out like that, and I was like, darn, that's a lot of moots. that didn't even count Myth Moot. So actually with Myth Moot, I think we have 10. But anyhow, it's going to be great. So again, Tex Moot, January 19th, Waco, Texas, and don't forget the call for papers deadline, which is coming up this weekend. Now, another thing that I wanted to tell you about, remind you of, which is coming up very much closer than any of these things, is our next Mythgard movie night. So the Mythgard Movie Club is meeting again tomorrow night, actually, on Thursday, November 15th at 9:30 p.m. They are wont to meet at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. They're going to be meeting at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time this month. So again, that's going to be tomorrow, November 15th, Thursday, November 15th at 9:30 p.m. They're going to be discussing the Night of the Living Dead, which is like the father of all modern zombie movies. Which obviously with the sort of the phenomenon that the anticipation of the zombie apocalypse has been, the Night of the Living Dead, of course, didn't invent the whole, it's not the first zombie movie, but really is kind of the progenitor of the whole modern zombie phenomenon. So it'll be really interesting to look at in this in this context. So I definitely, wow, Karita, you have 3 friends who have Night of the Living Dead tattoos. That's kind of amazing, actually. Not 1, not 2, but 3 different friends who all have tattoos related to Night of the Living Dead. That's kind of intense. Yeah. People apparently are into it, Karita. I too would draw that conclusion from that. They don't even know each other, so it's not like you have this like one group of friends who are like in a cult of this movie. No, they're completely independent. That's kind of amazing, actually. But anyway, there you go. So we know that Karita's friends are going to be joining us for the Mythgard Movie Club tomorrow night. So I hope you guys will too. The Mythgard Movie Club is a lot of fun. I've joined them for a couple of their discussions over the course of this past year. They meet once a month, and it was really designed to be a kind of companion to the Mythgard Academy. Of course, we do sort of longer term study of books, very long books in this case, right? But one of the things that I've always wanted is the opportunity to have more discussion of films. A lot of people have kind of wanted to talk about films, but a film has never won an election yet. We've been really primarily a book thing, of course, so far, and that's totally fine, right? That's who we are. Though we've done some films along the way as kind of accessories of some of the books that we've talked about, but we've never really had a chance to really just kind of dig into classic films. So I mean, the whole idea of the Mythgard Movie Club kind of emerged from discussions that I was having with Kat and Curtis, who are the hosts of the movie club, and they were really excited about the idea. So I've been really excited to see it moving forward. So anyway, just wanted to, I don't talk about it that much, but I just wanted to remind you that it's happening, and also that it's awesome. So I hope you will be able to I hope that you'll be able to join us tomorrow night, 9:30 p.m. All right, with that, let us return to Sir Thomas Malory because we still have much left to do. We are indeed doing essentially a catch-up class tonight. My goal is by the end of tonight's session, we will have come up to where we were supposed to be at the end of last week, so that we'll be back on track to see Sir Tristram go mad next week. Or sorry, not next week, the week after next, because of course there will be no class next week. I assume that's not much of a hardship, at least for you Americans, right, who will probably be, heading to grandma's house or wherever it is that you're going, as next week is Thanksgiving week, of course. But anyway, so we're so I'm going to be down at my in-laws next week, so I'm going to be out of commission and not entirely out of contact, but I certainly won't be able to broadcast. So next week we're going to have off, and then we'll be back. So the next class will be on the 28th. I'll try to remember to remind you of that at the end of class as well. Okay, so returning to our book here, Tarlonio, I noticed at the beginning of class you were pointing out that there was a Tarlonio asked at the beginning, wasn't there a dude in this book named Arthur? Whatever happened to him, right? Now, don't forget, Tarlonio, I warned you this was going to happen, right? After we had all that Arthur stuff at the beginning, right? I warned you that we were going to lose sight of King Arthur for a long time in the middle of the of this book. And indeed, we have come to the place where Arthur takes more than just a back seat, right? He's now sitting way off stage, right? Barely ever. He's referred to in the sense of like, these are Knights of King Arthur, right? But Arthur himself plays almost no role whatsoever for the majority of the center part of this book. By the time we'll get Arthur again briefly at the beginning of the Quest for the Holy Grail, but again, really there he's still only kind of the host at the sort of launch party of the Quest for the Holy Grail, and then he'll go away, or rather everyone else will go away and he'll stay home. Then we will get much more Arthur in the last 2 books as we work towards the actual fall and death of Arthur, after which the book is actually named, right? So anyway, that's definitely where we're planning now. Matthew Herschenroder says Nick Fury has assembled the Avengers and now they can take center stage. Yeah, kind of like that. kind of like that. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, he may, yeah, James Stevens, exactly. He is going to make a cameo occasionally, but yeah, it's not going to be anything more than a cameo, and that's okay, right? He has established this. We've established him as the centerpiece of this world, and now it's to watch the world around him. And really, you know, as I've said before, Lancelot is the continuous touchstone through this, right? And we're going to get back to some Lancelot. I was glad to see Lancelot again in the adventures of Sir Lacote Maltile, which we'll get to tonight. I was about to say I hope. No. I am confident we are going to get to the adventures of Lacote Maltile, and see again Lancelot's position and role, and again, which I think in the context of seeing how Arthur is taking a back seat, I think becomes more and more interesting, really, in thinking about how Lancelot and Arthur are seen to be related. We'll come back to this later on. What does it mean to say, you know, it's very common to say things like, you know, this sort of love triangle, right, which is at the center of the Arthurian story, this love triangle between the great king, his queen, and the greatest of that king's knights, right? But what exactly does that mean? What is exactly the role that Lancelot fills in the court of King Arthur? And that's I think one of the really important things to see as we're moving through this here. Yeah, okay, so let's get back to the text here. Okay. I also warned you, in addition to warning you before, that Arthur himself was scarcely going to appear in the middle of this, you know, for the bulk of the center of this book. I also warned that the book of Sir Tristram de Lyonesse was the most wandering and digressive of all of the sections of this book. And one of the things that one of the things that I find sort of interesting about this section is Malory seems to have made a particular narrative choice here, right? And this is one of the ways in which I find the Winchester manuscript version of the text so much more interesting than Caxton's version of the text. The two of them are very close to each other, of course, in the actual text. There's some differences in wording, but they're relatively close. But the way that Caxton divides it into books and chapters, kind of masks this, again, to me, very interesting dynamic that we get here in the book of Sir Tristram de Lyonesse, and that is the quite different narrative strategy that Malory undertakes here in the middle. You will recall that most of the beginning of this book, his approach was to divide it into chunks, right? He would take and he would tell, you know, this one story, and then he would sort of stop and say, okay, the end. Now I'm going to tell a different story. Like now I'm going to tell the story about how King Arthur went to war with Rome, right? And of course, that was especially noteworthy because, of course, he was obviously using a different source. We were looking at how much he was relying on the Middle English alliterative Morte Arthur there. But he's stopped doing that now, right? And of course, after that, we had the really admirable contained book of Sir Lancelot, right? And then the equally admirable and equally well contained book of Sir Gareth, right? Now we have the book of Sir Tristram, which is totally different, right? Within this book, instead of just saying, all right, I'm going to tell the story of Sir Tristram, right? Maybe it's longer, right? Maybe this book needs to be longer. It's not just this short series of adventures like we got for Lancelot, or this kind of one-off story of Sir Gareth, who will return as a sort of minor character, but Sir Gareth will never be the focus of the narrative. Again, it's kind of a one-off story of Sir Gareth. You could see that Malory is doing something different here. And, this is a really good question from Brian, asking about, are the French sources on which Malory is basing his work this meandering? Well, I mean, meandering like this is definitely a feature of medieval literature. I mean, digressions, what we call digressions, what modern readers call digressions, medieval readers would have called bonus content, right? So, there was a much, much, much higher tolerance for digressions, because, again, like free material, right? Who doesn't like that? So that's exactly, Tarlonio. It's like free add-on DLC was exactly what it was like, from a medieval point of view. So did they meander? Yes, but Brian, see, it's not just that he's following a source here, which is itself meandering, right? As I was emphasizing, especially with the Tristram stuff at the beginning, he is using French sources, right? The French Tristram's sources. And really, the French Tristram sources that he's using for the Tristram and Isolde material in this book is actually more separate from the rest of the narrative than almost anything we've read so far. The only thing that's similar would be the Roman stuff, the alliterative Morte Arthur stuff. I won't say that the Tristram legend was like hermetically sealed from the Arthurian story. It was. I mean, it wasn't. It was part of the same overall world, but it was not really linked. I mean, we don't really get like Lancelot and Tristram working out their difficulties here, and La Belle Isolde doesn't usually like adopt Guinevere as a pen pal, to help her through the hard times. The story of Sir Tristram is, or excuse me, the story of Tristan et Isolde is very, the French version is very much, a sort of a self-contained story, right? So you'd think, if Malory were even just adopting even he barely even needs a resolution on his own part, right, to keep it separate. It was already separate. Instead, what we see him doing is turning his back on the separateness of it and attempting to integrate it, right? Which, okay, he could have done that while still keeping it a discrete story. Like he could have just had, just like the story of Sir Gareth, right, has a beginning and a middle and an end, right? He could have done a Tristram and Isolde story, which had a beginning, middle, and an end. He's going to kind of do that, except he's not going to actually do the end. But whatever, it's got a beginning. It's got a beginning and a middle anyway, right? But the thing that he doesn't do is keep it contained as like what he announces at the beginning. That is, namely, that he's going to write the book of Sir Tristram de Lyonesse in the model, it would seem, of the book of Sir Gareth and the book of Sir Lancelot that came before it. Instead, he says, now we're going to turn unto Sir Lamorak, right? Now we're going to tell the story of Sir Lacote Maltail, which is one of the most random digressions in a sense. Like that is a different but fairly self-contained story that he is sort of shoehorning into the middle of the story of Sir Tristram with almost no obvious narrative justification for that, right? Like, why do we get? I mean, I'm not objecting to the story of Sir Lacote Maltail. I really like it in a lot of ways. Not my favorite knight in the world, but I quite like the story in some ways. I'm not saying we don't need it or that it should have been cut, but what I'm saying is, why didn't we get a freestanding, the book of Sir Lacote Maltail, right? We could have done, right? Who would have objected to that? But for some reason, that's no longer how he's thinking. Malory seems to be attempting to undertake a different kind of narrative here for some reason, and I'm not sure why, right? Is it because, okay, full stop. I have no idea why, but I'm keen to guess, right? So, having declared my complete lack of knowledge about why Malory did this, I can only theorize. And my theory about it is connected with what I was saying at the beginning of this section on Sir Tristram and La Belle Isolde. And that is that it seems fairly clear to me that Malory didn't just want to tell that story as an apparently freestanding Arthurian tale like he did the tale of Sir Gareth. He wanted to connect it because it needs to be in contact with the story of Lancelot and Guinevere, right? Of course, he literally puts the characters in contact with each other. The ongoing epistolary relationship between Tristram and Isolde and Lancelot and Guinevere, I always find charming and hilarious as we move forward. We'll see some of that today. But anyway, so I think he doesn't want to isolate it, because I think his impulse to integrate it, his impulse to bring those two really close. It's not enough just to have, here's the story of Tristram, and then next we'll tell the story of Lancelot and Guinevere and hope that you remember to sort of look back and forth, right? I think he doesn't want to do that. At least he doesn't seem like he wants to do that. So instead, what we have is this sort of bizarrely digressive thing. So again, why put the adventure of Sir Lecote Maltel all of a sudden in the middle of this, right? I was about to say, we now interrupt the story of Tristram to bring you the story of Sir Lecote Maltel, but that's not even it, right? It's, we now carry on interrupting the story of Sir Tristram in order to bring you the story of Sir Lecote Maltel, right? But why? Notice it accomplishes something, right? It's not totally irrelevant to the progression of the overall story. It's not irrelevant because Lancelot's in it, right? And Lancelot ends up playing not a central, but a significant role in it. And that seems to me to be the common thread. What is the one thing that seems to me to connect all of the narratives that he wants to tell in the story, in the book of Sir Tristram de Lyonesse? Ultimately, it's the story of Lancelot and Guinevere that he wants to tell, I think. That's the if I can see a thread that would seem to hold all of them together, that would seem to draw them all together, that might justify, perhaps, in the mind of the writer, trying to hold them all together in one big book rather than just breaking this down into a series of more easily digestible and more sort of whole and simple books. It's the way in which he wants them all to work together. And perhaps he was worried about the separateness. I don't really know. Yes. Now, hang on, Tarloniel. That is not critfic. It is okay to speculate about what the author might have been thinking. Critfic is when you make up a narrative about, it's when you resist doing close reading of a text and instead speculate about what the author was. So when you say this book was or when you say the Hobbit movies were really bad, and what makes the Hobbit movies really bad was like the whole shift from 2 films to 3 films, that's what made it really bad. That's critfic, because you're saying the film is bad, but you're not talking about what, like, the actual film, right? And the badness thereof, right? You're saying I'm instead inventing a narrative about how the badness came to be. That's the classic critfic. It's okay to speculate, especially if you make it clear that you are only speculating. So it's okay to speculate based on the evidence of the text as to what the author might have been thinking. Now, in the one, it's okay. It's not necessarily a very respectable thing to do, because at the end of the day, it doesn't much matter what Malory was thinking. And for me personally, that is, like, the text that we have is what matters. Why Malory did it can only be sort of a matter of curiosity. I, of course, can't help myself indulging that curiosity, but more than that, whenever I'm thinking about questions like that, whenever I'm thinking about questions of, like, why did the author do that? In a sense, what I'm really doing, of course, is thinking about what are the patterns of this text, right? What are the threads that bind this text together? Whether or not Malory was actually thinking that, who knows, right? And what's more, as I said, I don't especially care. Like, if the text leads me to this conclusion about, like, the significance of the development of the Lancelot and Guinevere narrative throughout this section, it's not like I would be dissuaded if Malory rose up, from the dead and said, like the Night of the Living Author, right, and said, "Oh, talk about a horror film! Oh man, the Night of the Living Author." There's a lot of jokes that could be made about that, but I will stop making them. Anyway, as if Malory, clawed his way out of his unquiet grave and said, "No, that's not what I was thinking at all," I would be like, "Okay, man, but like the thread is still totally there. Look at it, right? I'll show you where it is, right?" But yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, okay, so yeah, good. All right. Um, yeah, good, good. Um, Stephen Cover is imagining Jacob Marley warning you that tonight you'll be visited by 3 authors. Oh man, that's like a nightmare. Ah, whew, ah, yeah. Brian, you're right. Unwitting thematic consistency is still thematic consistency. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I mean, again, like the, um, yeah, what authors have to say about what they had in mind, what they were trying to accomplish is much less interesting to me than what they actually accomplished, right? As sometimes authors accomplish much more than they set out to accomplish. Sometimes they don't accomplish the things that they try to accomplish or think that they accomplished. At the end of the day, the book itself matters so much more than what the author thinks they wrote, really. Again, it's interesting if you happen to be interested in the author, like the person, but to me, again, the book much more important. Anyway, that's my opinion, and why The Night of the Living Author is like a horror movie to me. But anyway, so I wanted to start just with this passage, which seems to me a really classic example of Malory kind of dithering about his narrative structure here, right? So this is right when he's leaving the story of Sir Tristram behind to follow Lamorak. So remember, we had Lamorak and Sir Tristram came together. So we're still kind of following the Tristram thread, right? We're kind of starting to lose it, but it's still there. So Tristram has gone off and he's married La not so belle Isolde, La not quite so belle as the other Isolde. And he's married her, but remember, they haven't slept together, so that makes it okay in some way. And except not to Guinevere or to Lancelot or to La Belle Isolde, obviously. Anyway, but they're coming back over to England and they get shipwrecked on this island, which is like the same island that Sir Lamorak has gotten shipwrecked on. And so the two of them meet together after the, sort of unpleasantness that came before. You'll remember the chastity horn episode and all that kind of thing. And then when they meet, they both actually get along famously and agree to work together. And Lamorak lets Sir Tristram take care of the giant problem, and on the island, the giant who's persecuting everybody, and lets Tristram take all the glory and praises him for it. So, in the end, everybody lives sort of happily ever after, right? But we're still kind of following Tristram's story. But now from that place, right, where Sir Tristram and Sir Lamorak diverge and start going their separate ways, surprisingly, instead of following Sir Tristram, we follow Sir Lamorak. Right. So turn we unto Sir Lamorak that rode toward King Arthur's court. But he can't quite break away yet, right? He has one of those oops moments, right? Parentheses. The parentheses are modern editorial, right? So you have to kind of imagine this without the parentheses, right? Toward King Arthur's court. And so Sir Tristram, his wife, and Sir Cahaidens took a vessel and sailed into Bretagne unto King Howell, where they were welcome. And when they heard of these adventures, they marveled of his noble deeds. Now turn we unto Sir Lamorak, that when he was departed from Sir Tristramus, he rode out of the forest till he come to an hermitage. And when the eremite saw him, he asked from whence he come. Right, so now finally we're gaining some momentum again. I love this sort of false start. Right, it's one of those. I find Malory's sort of moments where he seems kind of amateur, right? Where he is kind of seems to be like messing up or not sure where he's going. I find them very, very charming, disarming, actually. Often when you're reading a very clever very expert author, right, who is always in control of his material, you can sometimes as a reader get a little, I don't know what, suspicious, maybe, if that's the right way to say it, right? Like, you are in the hands of someone who is like turning you and manipulating you in lots of different ways, and you kind of know it, probably, right? With Sir Thomas Malory, it's extremely disarming, right? Because you see something like this and you're like, oh, this is adorable, right? He was about to turn to Sir Lamorak, and then he remembered, wait, oh shoot, I forgot Tristram's wife and Tristram's brother-in-law still in England, right? I've got to get them. They need to go home to Britannia. I got to send them back to Brittany because I don't want them around for much longer, right? Tristram is right. He went out with his wife. He brought his wife along, his new young wife along with him, and but that's inconvenient. We need to get her home. So I'm gonna. But I forgot to pack her off. So we interrupted. And again, think about this without. Not only without parentheses, but without any punctuation at all, right? And you can see sort of the flow of his thought. So turn we unto Sir Lamorak that rode toward King Arthur's court, and so Sir Tristram, his wife, and Sir Cahydens took a vessel and sailed into Britannia. And it's like, wait, what? What just happened there? Oh, wait, now turn we. It's the now that I find most adorable. Now turn we, having remembered to do that. Now turn we under Sir Lamorak, and that's really cute. Remember, this is all being the kind of editing that would take care of this problem very easily was much harder to do not only before the word processor, but even before print, right? So it's all good. Anyway, okay. Let's go on to follow Sir Lamorak here a little bit. We're not going to follow Sir Lamorak for that long, but that's okay. Neither does Malory. The thing I want to focus on with Sir Lamorak as we look at his adventures is, again, in a sense, I want to be a little careful about this, but in a sense, what I want to ask is, what do we learn from Sir Lamorak, right? What's the point of Sir Lamorak's adventures? Is there a way? There's a reason, right? There's a reason that I don't think that the story of Sir Lamorak is not nearly so well fleshed out to suggest that the book does not show a very great interest in following the career of Sir Lamorak in any kind of complete way, nor are we setting up a cohesive narrative about Sir Lamorak, again, like we did with Sir Gareth, right? We don't get either one of those things. So if we're going to break sort of the flow of the narrative in order to step aside and follow along with Sir Lamorak, there's probably a reason why we're doing that, right? This is gonna be important for some reason, right? And so that's what I want to be thinking about. What is sort of what do we see here? And of course, one of the things that is for me impossible not to do is to be doing comparison and contrast, right? We've seen now already lots of knights traveling around on lots of adventures. How does Lamorak compare? What are we seeing with Sir Lamorak that maybe we don't see with others? For what things is Lamorak going to be a kind of point of contact, right? For the other knights that we have been seeing. Anyway, okay. So on the morn, Sir Lamorak departed, and as he rode, he saw 4 knightes fight against one, and that one knight defended him well, but at the last the 4 knightes had him down, and then Sir Lamorak went betwixt them, asked them why they would slay that one knight, and said it was sham 4 against one. Thou shalt well wait, said the 4 knightes, that he is false. So that is your tale, said Sir Lamorak, and when I hear him speak, I will say as ye say. Sir, said Sir Lamorak, how say you? Can you not excuse you none otherwise, but that ye are a false knight? Which would be a pretty poor excuse, you have to admit. Sir, yet can I excuse me, both with my word and with my hondas, and that will I mak good upon one of the best of him, my body to his body. Then spake they all at once, "We will not jeopardy our bodies, but we do well," they said, "and King Arthur were here himself, it should not lie in his power to save his life." "That is said too largely," said Sir Lamorak, "but many speaketh behind a man more than he will say to his face, and for because of your words ye shall understand that I am one of the simplest of King Arthur's court, and in the worship of my lord now do your best, and in the despite of you I shall rescue him." Okay, so what do we see here in this incident, right? Okay. First, notice that we should remember already that we have a parallel for this scene, right? Lamorak comes in and he sees 4 knights attacking 1. Now, again, we've seen this happen before. Remember, we had this with Sir Lancelot. This happened to Sir Lancelot when he was already tucked up in bed right in the upstairs garret of that nice old guy's house, and then he saw 4 knights attacking 1 knight. And the 1 knight running away in that case, and he jumps out the window, he lets himself down with the sheet and goes running out and insists on fighting against all 4 of them on the behalf of the 1 knight, who you will remember turned out to be Sir Kay, and then afterwards Lancelot took Sir Kay's armor. And that was how those sort of comical events began back in the book of Sir Lancelot. So we have established pretty clearly, and it's not so very difficult to see, that a good knight like Sir Lancelot and Sir Lamorak are going to object when they see something like this going down, right? It was shame for against on, and it's not only shame for the 4 knights to attack the 1 knight, but if the 1 knight sees 4 knights attack the 1 knight and he does not step in, he just stands there and watch that's shame unto him, right? Remember, Lancelot was very strong in his wording about this, right? And you may also remember that Sir Gawain was ultimately ditched by his 15-year-old damsel back in the story of Gawain, Owain, and Marhault when he didn't step in on the part of Sir Peleus when he was, or King Peleus, when he was being opposed by the 10 knights in a row. Now, different circumstances. They're not quite as tightly parallel as the situation with Lancelot and Kay. But still, we can see certainly that expectation, right? But now notice what Lamorak comes in with here. He does not automatically, it is not just about siding with the underdog, right? One thing that we see from Lancelot from Lamorak here rather, is that he is very interested in the rights and wrongs of the situation here. Like, tell me what's going on. This is a trial, right? He holds a spontaneous trial here. He rebukes the 4, saying it's shame for them to attack this other guy 4-on-1, but he asks them, why would you slay him, right? What's going on here? Because, it's good to ascertain the facts, right? And he does work to ascertain the facts. And notice that they accuse him of being false, right? Thou shalt well weet that he is false. In which case, so their argument essentially is, oh yeah, no, this isn't a shameful ganging up upon, right? No. This is like an execution, right? This is a false traitor knight, and we are doing him to death. Right, that's sort of we're although our actions might appear shameful, we're totally in the right here, right? Sir Lamorak, however, we see he is very interested in justice here, right? That is your tale, and when I hear him speak, I will say as ye say, right? He's well, we have to give the other guy a chance to say his part, right? I'm not just going to take your word for it. So that is interesting. A lot of and I think here especially of T.H. White, there's a lot of concern with the relationship between might and right, especially thinking back to the Arthurian world, and in particular with the whole dynamic of trials by combat. And this, of course, is going to be an issue that we're going to come back to later on in this book, especially in the context of trials by combat explicitly. But I think it's important to notice that they do not have, the knights, the good knights in this text do not have any kind of simplistic view on the relationship between might and right. So how is Lamorak supposed to know who's in the right? What evidence does he need in order to be convinced who's in the right and who's in the wrong here, right? Notice he gets almost nothing. In fact, you'll notice what never comes up once in this entire discussion. Do you notice what they don't ever talk about? Either the one knight or the four knights? Not even once does any of them mention what it's all about. Exactly, Veronica. Like, the facts of the case don't come up. Neither of them bring it up, right? What is he being false about? What did he do or not do? What did he say or not say? We don't have any idea, right? That's not even relevant, right? So what is relevant? How does Lamorak decide to take the part of the one against the four? And all you have to see, all Lamorak has to see, or rather all he has to hear, is how they position themselves, right? The one knight says, "Yet I can excuse myself," right? "Both with my words and with my hands, and that will I mak good upon one of the best of him, my body to his body." He doesn't say anything about the facts of the case, but he does say, "I am willing to to put my own life in jeopardy in order to prove that I am true, and I'm one-on-one with any of them," right? I stand ready to excuse myself. They say, no, we're not going to jeopardy our bodies, right? We refuse to do it. We refuse to meet him in fair combat in order to show who's right and who's wrong here, right? And then they go on to add that fatal rider. "But weet thou well, and King Arthur were here himself," which, of course, as we have observed, he's so not here. But anyway, "and King Arthur were here himself, it shall not lie in his power to save his life." So first, their unwillingness to jeopardy their bodies is a bad sign. It's not proof, but it's a bad sign. If you've got one side that says, "Yes, I'm willing to prove this with both my hands and my words," and the other one who says, "I'm not," it doesn't prove that the one person is in the right and the other person in the wrong, but it's a bad look, right? But then they go on to add to that, if King Arthur himself were here, it should not lie in King Arthur's power to save that guy's life, right? How are they invoking King Arthur here? Do you see the significance of the way they're using Arthur's name? What do you see what Arthur's name stands for here, right? It clearly stands for justice, for judgment, right? King Arthur would have the authority to make a judicial decision here, right? And they say, even if King Arthur himself were here, so even under the circumstances where the fullness of royal authority and, judiciary power were to exert itself on his behalf, we would still disregard that. We're going to kill him whether or not. We don't care about justice. I mean, in the simplest terms, they are saying we don't care about justice at all. That's kind of why we were attacking him 4-on-1 to begin with, right? Not only are we unwilling to fight him 1-on-1, because we're likely cowards, but we will not submit to anyone's judgment, not even King Arthur's, right? Brian, that's exactly right. They recognize no authority but themselves. That's exactly what they're saying there. And David, I agree. They're not only showing disrespect to Arthur, but complete disregard for I would even go further. Not only disregard for Arthur, but disregard for like the concept of justice, which clearly Lamorak thinks is important, right? This settles the case for Lamorak. Lamorak doesn't even need to know what the point of contention is. He does not need to know the facts of the case. One has submitted himself to judgment. The others categorically unwilling to submit themselves to judgment, adding on to the fact that they were already acting shamefully, right? Despite the shamefulness of their actions, he was willing to give them a chance, right, to prove their case, to state their case at least. Instead, they showed that they care nothing whatsoever about justice, and so he's now confident who's in the right and who's in the wrong, right? And notice that he explicitly puts himself in the place of the king, right? That is said too largely, he says. I love that phrase. To say something largely means to make a boast, right? That is said too largely. He's saying, now in saying that, you've just, I think, bitten off more you could chew right there, right? That is too large a saying for you. Many speak behind a man more than he will say to his face. It's easy enough to say, I disregard the justice of King Arthur, when you feel confident that King Arthur is safely far away, right? But I, as the least of Arthur's knights, right, am here to represent the authority of King Arthur. And so as the sort of spokesperson of the royal authority and of the justice, which you are currently ignoring and dissing, I am going to make you pay for that. Yeah, exactly, Karita. It's about talking big. Said too largely, talking big is a perfect, almost direct, literal translation of it, right? Yeah, talking big. Exactly. Okay. Again, I think the principles here are really important. Again, notice good knights care about this kind of thing. And notice how we keep getting positive and negative examples. I said before, much earlier on, many months ago now, nearer to the beginning of this class, one of the things that I find so fascinating about Malory's stories is they're not simple. They're not simplistic. All of Arthur's knights, all of the knights that Malory depicts, even Lancelot, even the paragon of knighthood, right, are complicated characters. They are like real people. And some of them are good at some things and bad at other things. And we see them doing things right and doing things wrong in order for us to get a sense of how knights are supposed to act, right? In order to try to build a standard by which we can really understand what's good and what's bad, that thing that we've been kind of struggling to do from within the text from the beginning. We've got to do a lot of adding and subtracting. Right. And I think this is pretty clearly an example of something that Lamorak is doing very well. And I am one of the simplest of King Arthur's court. He doesn't come in saying, I'm the third best knight in the world, FYI, right? No, he is like the least of Arthur's knights. It's Lamorak's particular strength, his humility, as I said last time. So that was, oh shoot, I'm blanking. What's the name of that knight? Sir Frol, I think. Sir Frol is that knight that he rescues, that he rescues from the other four. Of course, he goes on to fight the four knights right after that and kills two of them with the first two blows. Very Lancelot-ish, right? And the other two run away. Anyway, it's Sir Frol, I believe, whom he rescues and who travels with him for a while. But then he has a few other adventures and then departs. So they departed. Van within 2 or 3 days, Sir Lamorak found a knecht at a well sleeping, and his laddie sat with him in walket. Okay, so lady sitting awake, knight asleep next to a well. Of course, right? Remember Lancelot sleeping under the apple tree, being kidnapped by 4 sorceresses. Remember the damsel sitting by the well. the damsels picked up by Gawain, Owain, and Marhalt. Remember the well in which La Belle Isolde almost drowned herself, right? We have lots of precedents for these kinds of things. So here's the knight sleeping and the lady sitting with him awake. Right so come Sir Gawain and took the knight his laddie and set here up behind his squire. So Sir Lamorak rode after Sir Gawain and said, Sir, turn again. What will ye do with me? I am nephew unto King Arthur. Sir, for that cause I will forbear you, other else that laddie should abide with me, other else ye should just with me. Then Sir Gawain turned him and ran to him that ocht the laddie with his spear. But the knight with pure might smote down Sir Gawain and took his laddie with him. Okay, so there's a little bit of a lapse here. That is, we're not told about so the knight was sleeping, and that presumably is the knight that ocht the laddie, right? The knight who owns the lady, the knight whose that lady is at that point, right? The guy in custody of the lady, and we've seen this happen, right? Where like the custody of ladies can be kind of passed around, like Sir Segwarides' wife with Sir Bleoberis when he came to court, like La Belle Isolde herself when Sir Palomides came, right? Yeah, David, I agree. David Orbach says he's picking her up and setting her on a horse like she's an object that just sits still. I think not, in the sense that, like, it seems that the knight woke up, right, and apparently came after Sir Gawain. So I'm thinking from that, though we're not told explicitly that she's kicking up a ruckus, I'm thinking she probably kicked up a ruckus, and apparently the knight is woken up. Anyway, so here's Gawain, and the sleeping knight, the formerly sleeping knight, has roused himself and is coming after Sir Gawain, of course, to rescue his lady, whom Gawain has just made off with, right? Because there she was, attended only by a sleeping knight, so apparently in Sir Gawain's world, free lady, right? And then he beats him, right? The knight, this formerly sleeping knight, smites down Sir Gawain and takes his lady with him. So he takes his lady back. He has recovered his lady from Sir Gawain. And Josiah, I absolutely agree. You snooze, you lose. Yeah, that would seem to be Gawain's motto here, James. I agree. Okay. So, but Josiah, I agree with you. Gawain has graduated to outright antagonist here. Yeah, he's no longer just a more flawed than usual knight. He's just creating problems, right? Going about the countryside, just stealing people's damsels because you can, right? That's a problem. And poor Sir Lamorak is put into an awkward place. Gawain's pulling rank is extremely unattractive. Sir, turn again, he says. So says Lamorak to Gawain. Dude, you just stole that guy's damsel, right? What's up with that? And his only answer, Gawain's only answer is, what are you going to do? I'm King Arthur's nephew over here, right? Like, that gives him a right to steal damsels from people, right? Or at least immunity to reprisal for whatever it is he might seem to do. But anyway, Sleeping Knight then knocks down Sir Gawain and takes his lady back. All this sighed Sir Lamorak and said to himself, but I revenge my fellow. He will say me dishonour in King Arthur's court. Then Sir Lamorak returned and proffered that knight to fight. Sir, I am ready, sighed he. And there they come together with all their might, and Sir Lamorak smote the knight through both sides, that he fell to the earth dead. Well, that's a bit of an unfortunate ending. I think, however, that is the point. So I know this is tough. Jennifer Pope was just saying, so Lamorak kills this guy for defending his lady against the king's nephew. Well, okay, yes and no, right? Yes and no. Yes, that's what happens. I mean, yeah, he does kill him, and he this formerly sleeping knight was not in the wrong, right? I mean, he did knock down Sir Gawain, but Sir Gawain richly deserved it, right? Two things I think are important here. One, it's an accident. He's not trying to kill him, right? Jousting is a contact sport. These things happen. Notice that Sir Lamorak, the battle is in no ways dishonorable or unfair, right? Lamorak proffers that Knick defeat, right? He challenges him and he's like, hey, you want to fight? And the other knight says, yeah, all right, let's do this. I'm ready, right? And so they go and they fight, and, Sir Lamorak's spear smites him through both sides and he falls to the earth dead. Like, it happens. It's not optimal, right, for this kind of an encounter. But remember, this is why we get a lot of incidents that we've seen, especially back to the story of Sir Balin, you remember, of, what is one knight's fair fight is another person's murder, right? A lot of people who are the friends and relations of the knights who come off worse in encounters like this, who hold a grudge against the knight who killed him, understandably, though, again, it happens, right? Contact sport, people, right? We're fighting with deadly weapons here. You kind of have to sign the waiver before you go into this, right? It's exactly. Matthew Hirschenroder adding some dialogue for Sir Lamorak here. You seem a decent fellow. I hate to kill you. Yeah. So, Rachel says, and by the way, Rachel, so good to see you at Magnolia Moot. Rachel says, it seems like these knights fight for much less reason, and some of these fights lead to death, but as long as it was honorable, it's all okay. Yeah, I mean, of course, Rachel, I would add the proviso, which of course I'm sure you're thinking already, as long as you give mercy when the other person yields, right? That's why, remember, it was such a big deal when Gawain didn't do that, when the knight attempted to yield to him and he tried to decapitate him anyway and ended up accidentally decapitating his girlfriend instead. That's a big deal, right? Not offering mercy is a super big deal, because you need to have that out, right? Everybody doesn't need to fight to the death every time you fight. Fighting is like a sport, and it's fine. Anyway, so Lamorak fighting with him, certainly the way in which he fights with him is not bad. Now, why does he fight with him? Has Lamorak made a bad choice here? Well, what is his choice? Gawain is upset, right? Gawain just, that sleeping knight just took back the lady which he had rightfully stolen, right? So, Matthew, it's all your fault. Now I'm going to be doing the Princess Bride in my head all night. Anyway, he just stole back the lady which Gawain had rightfully stolen. So, Gawain is upset. Lamorak says to himself, "But I revenge my fellow. He will sigh me dishonor in King Arthur's court." So, Lamorak is feels that he needs to fight for Sir Gawain because Sir Gawain is a fellow knight of the Round Table, right? And if he sees a knight of the Round Table dishonored, right, defeated, and does not take his part, does not offer to fight with the guy who just beat him, he would be dishonored. Well, more than that, Gawain will see to it that he is dishonored, right? Gawain is going to slander him if he doesn't do this. Now, yes, David, you have his reasoning correctly. If he doesn't take the side of a Round Table knight, then Arthur's court will think bad of him. Again, with the added proviso, Gawain will make sure that they think badly of him. He will say me dishonor in King Arthur's court, I think speaks a world of a world of bad about Sir Gawain, or at least of Sir Lamorak's assessment of Gawain's character, right? Now, one of the things that I think is important to remember here is Lamorak fighting in a wrong cause. Not necessarily. Okay. It would depend. See, here's one of the problems here. One of the problems here is that we don't really know. This whole thing takes an unfortunate turn, right? When the knight is killed. That wasn't Lamorak's intention. What I'm interested to know, or what I would be interested to know, is what Sir Lamorak's plan had been. So Lamorak's plan is, I'm going to joust with this guy. I'm going to knock him off his horse. Pretty good odds of that. I'm pretty good, right? So I'm going to knock this guy off his horse. If I knock him off his horse, maybe he's going to be like, hey, like, you know, dismount and fight me with swords to the uttermost. And I'm going to be like, no way, man. It's all good. And in fact, keep your lady, right? It's all about the lady, right? The lady is the grievance between him and Gawain. So the only way in which Lamorak would really put himself in the wrong here would be if he is fighting for Sir Gawain's right to have the lady, which he has none of, right? As Lamorak obviously knows. So if Lamorak knocked this dude off his horse and takes his lady from him and says, all right, I'm taking this lady and I'm giving her to Sir Gawain and there's nothing you can do about it, then Lamorak is unequivocally, unquestionably in the wrong. Or at least he is championing the bad cause of Sir Gawain. But he is not necessarily championing Gawain's cause here. He is only trying to repeal the dishonor to a knight of Arthur's court. He just watched a knight of Arthur's court get knocked down, right? And so for the honor of Arthur's court, he needs to step in here, right? And if he doesn't, he knows that Gawain is gonna badmouth him, right? This is not that is not a slight that would be overlooked, right? So he needs to fight for the honor and reputation of Arthur's court. But again, that doesn't mean he has to take the dude's lady from him and give the dude's lady back to Sir Gawain, right? He could still knock him off his horse, say, okay, can we be friends now? You know, that guy's my fellow. We're both knights of the round table, but you seem a decent fellow, right? You can have your lady. Between you and me, Gawain is kind of a jerk and he shouldn't have done that, but you knocked him off his horse, so I did not knock you off his horse, and it's all fair, right? That's my guess at what Lamorak was trying to accomplish, but it doesn't work out that way because he accidentally kills the dude in this jousting encounter, right? Now, there are a couple other factors there that I think are really important here. One, Josiah points out that Gawain's appeal to Arthur mirrors the four knights' dismissal of Arthur earlier on, which puts Lamorak in an awkward spot, right? I agree. We can see some sorts of parallels here, right? Those other guys were saying, hey, we disregard Arthur. We don't care about Arthur, right? And Lamorak is in the, so he says to Gawain, hey, dude, Gawain, what are you doing? Right? And Gawain's like, dude, King's nephew over here. What are you going to do about it? Right? So that puts Lamorak in the position of having to say, well, I don't care if you're King Arthur's nephew or not. Right? That's, it's awkward, at least. Right is still right. And Lamorak knows what's right. And just because Sir Gawain do it doesn't make it right. And can I add, nobody knows that better than Sir Lamorak. Anybody remember who Sir Lamorak is? What's his genealogy again? Who's Sir Lamorak the son of? Anybody recall that? Anybody remember? Who's his dad? Quiz time. Okay, no problem. I'll remind you. King Pellinor. Yeah, you got it. A couple of people got it. Yep. Matt and Jennifer. Good job. King Pellinor is Sir Lamorak's dad. Okay, Sir Lamorak is the greatest of King Pellinor's sons, at least the most, the greatest knight of them. Remember what happened to King Pellinor? Gawain murdered him, right? Remember that scene where Gawain was like, I'm going to take this guy out right now. And then Gaheris, his brother, was like, no, wait until I get knighted. Then we can take him out together, right? So, and they did, right? They murdered Lamorak's dad. So Gawain and his brothers, not Gareth, murdered Lamorak's father. Nobody knows better than Sir Lamorak that Sir Gawain is not like that everything Sir Gawain does isn't right just because he happens to be Arthur's nephew, right? James Stevens says, wasn't it King Pellinor that didn't help that knight and lady at that other well because he was on a quest? Yep, that was King Pellinor. And here's his son in another awkward position with a knight and a lady at a well. Yes, it's almost like, again, we're supposed to be putting these things together. King Pellinor did nothing, and that was bad. Sir Lamorak has done something, but so again, these are complicated situations. Has Sir Lamorak done just the right thing here? No, I don't think Lamorak has done just the right thing here. I think that what seems clearly to be the right thing is to confront Gawain and say, dude, yeah, you got knocked off your horse, but you completely deserve it, you jerk, right? You can't act like that. That would, I think, be the right thing to do. Like when I ask myself, what would Lancelot do? I think that's what Lancelot would have done in this situation, right? What does Lamorak do? Lamorak tries to sort of thread the needle, right? At least that's my reading of this, that he's not taking Gawain's part. He's not convinced that Gawain is in the right here. But he's trying to kind of have it both ways. How can I keep Gawain off my back and yet also serve the cause of justice? And he fails. But one of you a little while back was remembering something really important. Yes, Bruce, it was you. About that business about Lancelot saying if you loved Lady Paramours, you're going to end up killing the wrong person. Yes, by mishap. Exactly. Lots of mishap, lots of unhap that goes on here. Sir Gawain is like a roving knight of mishap, right? Gawain's involved, then yeah, things are likely to get messy, right? And again, is it Lamorak's fault too? Yeah, Lamorak bears some responsibility for this. Now again, his motivation, I think he went about it the right way, the combat. It was an accident, right? He just like the death, it happens, right? Again, combat with, deadly weapons, it happens, but he clearly didn't want to kill him. It was unfortunate that it didn't. It's going to lead to misfortune a little bit later on when he meets this dude's brother. Of course, who is this dude? The formerly sleeping, now dead knight. You remember who he is? Sir Frol. He's the one that he rescued 1-on-4 in the previous slide, right? He was the innocent dude whose part Lamorak took and whose cause he judged without even hearing the facts of the case, without needing to hear the facts of the case, to be in the right. That was Sir Frol, right? And he now just killed him by accident, right? But again, this stuff happens, and if we apply Lancelot's rule is when stuff like this happens, you need to take a step back and evaluate your life, right? Because this kind of thing, it might be an accident. You didn't mean to kill him. But if this kind of thing happens to you, time to take 1 or 2 steps back and think about some of your other choices, right? Because Lancelot says this stuff doesn't happen by chance, right? It might be an accident, but it's happening for a reason, right? And probably because you've screwed up somewhere along the way. If you were living right, this isn't going to happen. That's one of Lancelot's doctrines, right? And remember, Lancelot was explicitly talking about sexual virtue there, right? Again, if you go about doing the courtly love thing, loving ladies' paramours, then that's going to lead to this kind of thing, right? So it's not just like obvious cases, like I'm fighting for someone who is in the wrong, right? Or I'm trying to like steal something by force, or I'm, trying to ravish that dude's lady. Like then you're obviously in the wrong, and it's not hard. You don't have to take a full step back, right, in order to figure out what's going wrong with your life. But Lancelot says, any of these, if you're not living right, then this is one of the consequences you can expect to have. You can expect to see. You're going to accidentally kill folks that you didn't want to kill. It's a sure symptom. So Lamorak, time to rethink. And then you're going to meet his brother, and that's going to be super awkward. Now, Lamorak ends up fighting this guy. And in the middle of the fight, Lamorak finds out who he is, right? Sir Belliance is the name of the guy, whose identity Sir Lamorak learns. And in the middle of this fight, Lamorak has this moment. Alas, sighed Sir Lamorak, full well me ought to know you, for ye are the man that most have done for me. And therewithal Sir Lamorak canailed a down, and besought him of grass. Arise up, said Sir Belliance, other else, thereas thou canailest, I shall slay thee. That shall not need, said Sir Lamorak, for I will yield me to you, not for no fear of you, nor of your strength, but your goodness maketh me to loth to have ado with you. Wherefore I require you, for God's sake, and for the honour of kinghood, forgive me all that I have offended unto you. Lamorak sees the problem, right? He is finally confronted with the guy that he's fighting, who is the brother of the guy he accidentally killed after having previously rescued him. So the brother of the guy that he accidentally killed turns out to be the guy whom he says, you are the man that has done most for me. Now, confession. I don't remember Sir Belliance from before. Did we ever hear the story of what Sir Belliance did previously for Sir Lamorak? I don't remember it. Maybe we did. If we did, I've forgotten. If we did and you remember, remind me, because I don't remember. I don't think it happened, though, but I could be wrong. I never am very confident when people refer to things like this. I'm like, maybe I just forgot. But I don't think we actually know this story. But it doesn't matter what the backstory is. All we know is that Lamorak feels indebted to this guy. So here he finds himself not only having accidentally murdered the brother of this dude to whom he feels so indebted. Now he's in the middle of fighting him, right? So he kneels down and refuses to fight anymore, right? Take me prisoner. I yield myself to you. Take me prisoner, right? I'm not yielding to you because you've beaten me, right? But your goodness mocketh me to loth to have ado with you. You are too. Now that I know who you are good. You are a good man, right? And I owe you so much. I can't fight you anymore. Alas, sighed Sir Belliance, leave thy knailing, other else I shall slay thee without mercy. Then they rode again to battle, and either wounded other, that all the ground was bloody thereas they fought. So he forces Lamorak to keep fighting him. But at the last, Sir Belliance withdrew him aback, and set him down a little upon an hill, for he was faint for bleeding, that he might not stand. It's a pretty good reason to sit down a little bit if you can't stand, because you've almost bled out. Then Sir Lamorak threw his shield upon his back, and come to him, and asked him what cheer. Hey, how you doing, man? Well, said Sir Belliance, I'm fine. How are you? Ah, sir, Yet shall I show you favor in your mal-ease. Ah, Knecht, said Sir Belliance unto Sir Lamorak, thou art a fool, for and I had thee at such advantage as thou hast me, I should slay thee. But thy gentleness is so good and so large that I must needes forgive thee mine evil will. So Lamorak tries to surrender to him, and he wouldn't take it, right? He forces him to keep fighting. Lamorak fights him to a standstill again, and doesn't even make the guy ask him for mercy, right? Just comes up to him and says, how are you? How can I help, right? I shall show you favor in your mal-ease, right? You look like you're not feeling so well, right? Let me help you. And he says, man, you're a fool. If I had you at my mercy the way that you have me, I'd have totally killed you, right? But this brings about their reconciliation. Lamorak's refusal to, first his refusal to fight more, then his refusal to even take him prisoner. He could, right? It's significant. Remember remember that fight between Sir Tristram and Sir Blamor de Ganys, when Sir Tristram was serving as the champion of King Anguishans of Ireland, right? When Sir Blamor refused to yield himself and insisted that Sir Tristram kill him because he refused to say the hated word, namely yield, like I yield myself to you. He refused to be yielded as recreant. But so it's a big deal to yield to somebody else, to yield yourself beaten to somebody else is a really big deal. And he doesn't make him do it, right? Lamorak could easily take him prisoner now to make him ask for mercy, and he doesn't do it. Yeah. Yeah, Rachel, he is a fool, right? There is wisdom, of course, in his folly. Or rather, this is one of those examples where acting in a way which is not to your obvious and immediate advantage is, of course, the right thing to do. Calling him a fool, he's, of course, not, I think, actually trying to insult him, right? He's just saying, look, you're not doing a good job of looking out for number one there, Lamorak, right? Had I been in your position, I would not have shown you this mercy. He is showing him goodness, which does not make external sense, right? And so ends up winning over Sir Belliance, and they swear friendship forever, and they're BFFs from now on. Once again, Lamorak doing things right most of the time, mostly, right? Not a perfectly clean record, but some interesting examples. Again, notice how I in order to try to understand these things, the comparisons I keep making. Remember when this other guy did this? Remember when we've seen this same kind of situation again? It's one of the things. I know that the knightly combats seem repetitive over the course of this book, but I've always thought that people who have that reaction to Malory, who are reading Sir Thomas Malory and are saying, man, okay, if we've seen one pair of knights tracing and traversing, we've seen them all, haven't we? No, we haven't. And the very similarities among them are one of the things which I think makes it so interesting. We just have to understand this is the theater of human interaction that Malory is most interested in, right? And that's the framework of this story. But he is still really interested in how individual people respond in different circumstances, the kinds of choices they make, the kind of people that they prove themselves to be, the kind of principles that they profess, and the kind of principles that they actually follow. These are things that Malory is really, the story is clearly really interested in. And, the knightly battlefield is just the occasion on which these things happen. Anyway, all right, let's talk a little bit more briefly. That is, I'm going to try to spend a little bit less time per slide here on the story of Sir La Cote Maltail. Okay, so to the court of King Arthur there came a young man, bigly mad, and he was richly beseen, and he desired to be made a knight of the king's. But his overgarment sat over thwartly, howbeit it was rich cloth of gold. His overgarment sate over thwartly. So his coat looks funny, right? His coat is hanging off him strangely. He's not neatly and fashionably dressed, though richly. The cloth, the coat, the overgarment in question is a very rich coat. It just fits really badly. What is your name? Sighed King Arthur. Sir, my name is Brunor Lenoir, and within short space ye shall know that I am coming of good kin. It may well be, sighed Sir Kay the Seneschal, but in mocking ye shall be called La Cote Maltail. That is as much to say, the evil shapen coat. I'm going to call you the evil shapen coat, man, because your coat looks funny. It is a great thing that thou askest, said the king, trying to keep things, on a slightly higher level of discourse here. But for what cause wearest thou that rich coat? It is for some cause, sir, he answered. I had a father, a noble knight, and as he rode an hunting upon a day, it happened him to lie him down to sleep, and there come a knight that had been long his enemy. And when he saw he was fast on sleep, he all to hew him, and this same coat had my father on that time. And that maketh this coat to sit so evil upon me, for the stroke is be on it as I found it, and never shall it be amended for me. Thus to have my father's death in remembrance, I wear this coat till I be revenged. And because ye are called the most noblest king of the world, I come to you to make me a knight. Okay, James, yes, Maltail means poorly tailored, essentially, is what that means, yes. The poorly tailored coat, it fits very, very badly. Sir Kay does what he did before with Beaumains, except much worse, right? I mean, Kay has egg on his face immediately, right? Immediately. Because with Beaumains, right, he gives him a funny name because he's convinced that this guy is really a peasant who's trying to masquerade as a knight, right? He's trying to put this guy in his place. He turns out to be wrong, quite drastically wrong. But, at least what he thought was kind of understandable. He had a pretty good case for himself, right? Here, what he's making fun of is much more superficial, right? Okay, this guy's coat doesn't fit very well. Yeah, that's he looks a little bit funny, Kay, right? But then immediately, the knight being like, oh, you want to know why my coat doesn't fit well? Because this is the coat my father wore when he was murdered. And so I wear his ragged, his slashed up coat to remind me of his death as I have, dedicated my life to avenging my dead father. Thank you very much for asking why my coat doesn't fit very well, right? And Karita, I totally agree. In an ideal world, Kay would be like, oh, well, okay. It's actually kind of a good reason to wear an ill-fitting coat, right? But Kay is totally unrepentant and continues to call him La Cote Maltail. Karita is wondering if Kay exists solely to make Arthur look good by comparison. Well, sort of, except, of course, he also kind of makes Arthur look bad for the fact that, Sir Kay is still his seneschal, right? Now, he promised their foster father that nobody else would ever be a seneschal again as long as Kay was alive, which has turned out to be an inconveniently long time. Kay has his good points still. But during this section of the text, it's quite easy to forget them. Yeah. And Josiah, I agree. His interjection does seem really random. He does seem like the official court nicknamer for all passersby. Rather, just sort of shows the license that he seems to feel that he has to say uncourteous things, which is not a good look. So this same now remember, no, first of all, actually, just very briefly, notice what Arthur comes back to, right? Arthur's not interested in the coat so much. That is, he's not interested in why the coat is ill-shapen exactly, but he says it's a great thing that you ask, right? Sir Lacote Maltail is asking to be made a knight by King Arthur, right? That is kind of a big deal. And not a privilege, because it's something he can go around bragging about for the rest of his life, right? I was made a knight by King Arthur himself, right? It's kind of a big deal. And so King Arthur is not going to like essentially endorse this guy, knowing nothing about him, right? So he's asking really kind of a lot, right? So here he is, this young kid in the court, and there's a hart. So King Arthur and most of his knights go riding off to try to kill the hart, right? We're going off on a big hunt, leaving Lacote Maltail alone with only a few other knights back at the court. And by a sudden adventure, there was an horrible lion kept in a tower of stone. Why is there a lion in a stone tower there in Arthur's court? I don't know, man. It was a sudden adventure. That's all I can tell you. And he broke loose and came hurling before the queen and her connectors. And when the queen saw the lion, she cried out and fled and pried her connectors to rescue her. And there was none but 12 connectors that abode, and all the other fled. Then sighed Lacote Maltail, now I see that all coward connectors be not dead. And therewithal he drew his sword and dressed him before the lion. And that lion gaped wide and come upon him, ramping to have slain him. And he again smote him in the midst of the head, that it claff in sunder, and so dashed down to the earth. And anon it was told the queen how the young man that Sir Kay named Lacote Maltail had slain the lion. And anon with that the king come home, and the queen told him of that adventure. He was well pleased, and sighed, upon pain of mine head, he shall prove a noble man, and faithful and true of his promise. And forthwithal the king made him a knecht. Now, sir, said this young knecht, I require you and all the knechters of the court that ye call me none other name but Lacote Maltail. Insomuch that Sir Kay hath so named me, so will I be called. He embraces the name, right? I insist on being called the ill-fitting coat. Yeah. Oh, man, Doer's stroke being a little bit cynical here. This sounds like it was all arranged by Lacote Maltail. Maybe, man. I don't know. Yeah. Jennifer thinks Arthur obviously has a zoo of death in case he wants to hunt particularly dangerous critters. Maybe. Maybe. Who knows what that lion was going to be used for? I'm sure there's a good reason for it, really. Yeah. Anyway, so Sir Lacote Maltail proves himself, right? And this is all Arthur needs. Arthur sees this guy put himself in danger to save the queen, and not only that, but he accomplishes a pretty remarkable feat of arms in not decapitating, but bisecting the head of a charging lion. That was pretty cool. So he makes him a knight. That's all he needs to see, right? He shall prove a nobleman and faithful and true of his promise. You can just tell, right, from what the character that he showed in this event. So that's enough for Arthur to agree to make him a knight. And he insists on being called the ill-made coat. Now you'll notice So Michelle asks, is this to rub Kay's face in it as he gains honor while using the mean nickname that Kay gave him? Yes, this is on the one hand, this is a fitting sort of rebuke to Kay, right? But at the same time, it's also, I think, I don't know. It's also, I think, a little bit of just sort of heaping coals on Kay's head, because remember, he doesn't like. It turns out he doesn't mind being known by the coat, right? The coat is his dead father's coat, which he wants to draw attention to. It's why he's wearing it, right? He wants his attention always to be on it. So he's like, no, yeah, that's fine with me. Let's go a further. Instead of just wearing it all the time, I embrace having that as my name, right? So that, like, my very name itself becomes a reminder of this quest that I am on to avenge my father's death. So Dolorous Stroke, I agree. It is a very keen rebuke of Kay, right? But I agree with you. I doubt that Kay feels it very keenly. Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Then this lady comes to court, and she has this big adventure. It's this shield that she has, and the knight who carries the black shield is going to have some big momentous adventure. And Sir Lacote Maltau asks for the adventure and goes off with the lady, and she is constantly saying bad things about him and talking him down. If it sounds like you've been here before, you have, of course. This is almost exactly like the story of Sir Gareth, down to the ill-tempered lady who is accompanying him. But things go a little differently for Sir Lacote Maltau than they went for Sir Gareth. Thus she rode long and chid. She does a lot of chiding. And so within a while there comes Sir Bleoberis, the good knight, and there he justed with Sir Lacote Maltau. And there Sir Bleoberis smote him so sore that horse and all fell to the earth. Then Sir Lacote Maltau arose up lichtly, and dressed his shield, and drew his sword, and I would have done battle to the utterance, for he was wood wroth. Not so, said Sir Bleoberis de Ganis, as at this time I will not ficht upon foot. Then the damosel Maledisant, that's her name, Maledisant, of course, rebuked him in the foulest manner, and bade him turn again, coward. Ah, damosel, said he, I pray you of that is, she's telling Sir Lacote Maltau to turn around and go home, right? When it's what she said, turn again. I pray you of mercy, of missay me no more, for my grief is enow, though ye grief me no more. Yet I call me never the worse knight, though a Mare's son hath filed me, and also I count myself never the worse man for a fall of Sir Bleoberis. So thus he rode with her 2 days, and by fortune there he encountered with Sir Palomides, the noble knight, and in the same wise Sir Palomides served him as did Sir Bleoberis to forehand. Then sighed the damosel, What dost thou here in my fellowship? For thou canst not sit no knight, nor withstand him on buffet, but if it were Sir Dagonet. You remember Sir Dagonet, who is King Arthur's fool, was sent after Sir Lacote Maltau by Kay, who is obviously not, in fact, feeling Sir Lacote Maltau's rebuke very keenly, and tries to shame him by sending the king's fool out to joust with him. Now, Sir Lacote Maltau defeats the fool, but of course, the lady Maledisant makes a lot of hay with that one, right? Now, Josiah, you're right. At least she doesn't call him a ladle washer, right? She could do much worse than she's doing. Okay, so remember how Sir Gareth's story went, right? Sir Gareth's story, he was being, constantly called ladle washer and worse, right, by his lady, but like every single time he fought, he won, right? He fought Sir Lancelot to a draw, right? He beat Kay himself, fought Sir Lancelot to a draw, and then either beat and or killed every other knight that he faced all the way pretty much through the entire rest of the story, and certainly through the whole time that the damsel was bad-mouthing him, right? Poor La Cote Maltail gets knocked off his horse immediately by the first two other knights after Sir Dagonet that he meets, right? And this is it's interesting. On the one hand, one thing that's interesting about this is it's kind of interesting to have the story of a knight, as I said in my subtitle here, it's the life of an above average knight. Sir La Cote Maltail is really a good knight, but he's not the best knight, right? He's not really top 10. So you can be a good knight, but not be top 10. You can even be a good enough knight to have a whole little story all to yourself, right? But that doesn't mean you can beat Sir Bleoberis or Sir Palomides. I mean, those guys, those are top 10. Sir Palomides is top 5. Sir Bleoberis is top 10 at least, right? So, as he says, he's right. He's right. There's no shame in losing to those two guys, right? Just because I'm not one of the 10 best knights in the world doesn't mean I'm, chopped liver over here. But still, it's kind of embarrassing, right? It's hard to sort of not wonder along with the damsel to some extent. Okay, like, why are you on this? Why are you are hardly the most qualified knight in the land, right? Yeah. Carita says, Sir Tristram, if Sir Tristram is the budget Lancelot, Sir La Cote Maltail is the budget Gareth. Yeah. He does not have the distinction of Sir Gareth, right? Now we're going to learn more about this in a little bit. But again, it's just interesting to see him losing like that. He's starting to sound like Gareth, the Knight of Destiny, but he's not the Knight of Destiny. He's just, pretty good. Then Mordred explains. Mordred, right? First time we've met with Mordred. Second time. He was at a tournament before. But this first time we've had conversation with Sir Mordred, right? As he's wandering about. So Sir Mordred is now old enough to be a wandering errant knight like everybody else. And the damsel is still questioning the valor of Sir La Cote Maltail. Now, keep in mind, this is after Sir La Cote Maltail has made his greatest accomplishment yet, like that when he chases the guy into the castle and kills him, and then he's set upon by 100, so he's fighting 1 on 100, right? And he fights his way clear, killing 12 of them on the way out, and the damsel's like, oh yeah, that totally didn't happen, right? I'm sure he cheated. Mordred says, be my head, sighed Sir Mordred to the damsel. Ye are greatly to blame so to rebuke him, for I warn you plainly, he is a good knight, and I doubt not but he shall prove a noble man. But as yet he may not sit sure on horseback, for he that must be a good horseman, it must come of usage and exercise. If you want to be a good jouster, you need to practice, it turns out. Wow! Notice how no one's ever said this before. This is the first of all of Arthur's knights to admit that you're not just born with your natural skill, right? Like, you actually have to practice to get better at this over time. Well, anyway, jousting, anyhow. But when he cometh to the strokes of his sword, he is found noble and mighty. And that saw Sir Bleoberis and Sir Palomides, for wit you well they were wily men of war. For they would know anon when they saw a young knight by his riding, how they were sure to give him a fall from his horse, other a great buffet. But for the most party, they will not leact on foot with young knightes, for they are mightily and strongly armed. For in like wise Sir Launcelot du Lac, when he was first mad knight, he was often put to the worse on horseback, but ever upon foot he recovered his renown, and slew and defouled many knightes of the Round Table. And therefore the rebukes that Sir Launcelot did unto many knightes causeth them that be men of prowess to beware. For oftentime I have seen the old praved knightes rebuked and slain by them that were but young beginners. So exactly, Tarlonio, you don't need to practice swordplay, just riding. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 So, okay. Fascinating little glimpse into the like actual workings of the system, right? Sir Bleobaris and Sir Palomides both could tell, right? One look at they're pros, right? One look at Sir Lacote Maltau and they could tell, oh, here's a young knight, right? Remember, nobody recognizes anybody. So he could be anybody, but they can tell by his riding. They're looking at him on his horse and they're like, oh man, this guy's a plum, right? I'd knock this guy off anytime I want, right? But they're not going to alight on foot and fight with him because, that's risky. That's risky. Notice, Carita, yeah, Lancelot didn't spring out of the womb a perfect jouster. That note that Mordred gives, that Sir Lancelot himself was often put to the worse on horseback early in his career, is kind of interesting, right? A little bit shocking. Yeah, so apparently Sir Palomides and Sir Bleobaris are padding their stats, essentially, right? They can knock Sir Lacote Maltau off his horse. Yeah, no problem, right? They can put that on their resume, but they're not going to fight him on foot because, it's not worth it, right? Here's the best comparison I can think of. So what Sir Bleobaris and what Sir Palomides did with Sir Lacote Maltau there is kind of like when, so I'm not a big fan of American college football, but there's a phenomenon just like this in American college football. Those of you who do know anything about college football, what team is like the University of Michigan or Ohio State or, like Texas A&M, who are they likely to schedule to play against, like on homecoming week when all the alums are in town and stuff? Sometimes it's the big rival, but not often. You know who they play against? They play against like Appalachian State University, right? They bring in some cupcake team, which is like cannot possibly compete with them, right? Whom they're going to thump like 75-3, right? Why do they do this? Because then like the alums are happy because the alums are going to come in to the campus and they're going to see the game. What do they want to see? Well, they don't want to see the home team lose, right? So you bring in a team that you can beat. And this is part of how you proceed in the college football standings, right? You got to kind of balance things. You want to have a competitive schedule, but not too competitive, right? You want to pad your one-loss record with plenty of easy wins along the way. It's part of how the game is worked. So you pad your record by fighting against lower ranking or completely unranked, totally off the bottom of the ranking teams, right? It's how you play the system. Sir Bleobaris and Sir Palomides doing the same thing, right? Sir Lacote Maltau, notice what will happen. Later on, Sir Lacote Maltau might get better, right? He might, who knows, maybe he'll be a top 10 knight someday. He just got knighted. He's a young kid still, right? He just got knighted. Maybe he's going to be a top 10 knight someday. And then Sir Bleobaris and Sir Palomides will always be able to say, yeah, I totally knocked Sir Lacote Maltau off his horse. Absolutely, I did that. Do you think those dudes who knocked Lancelot off his horse don't remember it fairly frequently and in public? Right? Come on. You've got that on your resume for life. I knocked Sir Lancelot du Lac off his horse, right? Come on. Absolutely. Yeah. Jennifer's asking, is it not dishonorable to just ride off without continuing the fight on foot? Well, see, it's frustrating right, for the knight who got knocked off the horse, but you're not required to continue to fight on foot, especially if there's not a really good reason to fight, right? I mean, if you're just kind of fighting for the heck of it as a kind of sport, as just part of the overall competition, then no, it's fine. You don't need to fight to the death for something like that. You just be like, no, man, I'm good. I'm going to carry on. Right. But it is very frustrating for the knight who got knocked off his horse because he wants a chance to win his own back, right, with the sword play. You remember, this is what Lamorak was so upset about when Sir Tristram knocked him off his horse and then wouldn't fight him on foot, right? Because he was like refusing to give him satisfaction. But anyway, yeah, certainly Karita, absolutely. The new kid can't complain. Yeah, now, of course, Zach Coman is saying, unless you're my alma mater and you play easy teams and still lose homecoming games. Yeah, well, of course, that's the risk, right, of bringing in a cupcake team, because then if you lose, it's like doubly embarrassing. But again, same situation for Sir Bleoberis and Sir Palamides, right? If they were to go up against this rookie kid that they can tell he's a greenhorn just from looking at him, right? If they lose, oh man, right? That's like double shame, right? They're gonna go down 2 pegs in the overall leaderboard if they lose to him. But still fairly safe bet. Right. All right. Anyway, Sir Mordred's insight is interesting, but wait, hang on a second, quick. Yes, Marilyn. Is it significant that when Lancelot arrives, Mordred leaves? The narrator says nothing about it. We're just told that when Sir Lancelot arrives, Mordred excuses himself. Right. Yes, I think that's significant, though the narrator is not making anything of it yet. Is Sir Mordred running away? Not running away in the sense of like Lancelot's after him or chasing him, but yes, I do think it's significant that Mordred does not travel in company with Sir Lancelot. Okay. Lancelot comes home after this, right? He's already off. Sir Lacote Maltile is already off on his quest. So God me salve, said Sir Launcelot unto many of his fellows, it was shame to all the good noble Connectes to suffer such a young Connect to take so high adventure on him for his destruction. For I wool that ye wit, said Sir Launcelot, that this damosel Maledisant hath borne that shield many a day for to seech the most proved Connectes, and that was she that Sir Bruce Sans Pite took the shield from, and after Sir Tristramus de Lyonesse rescued that shield from him, and gaf it to the damsel again, a little afore that time that Sir Tristram is fought with my nephew, Sir Blamor de Gannis, for a quarrel that was betwixt the King of Ireland and him. So if you wanted to go back and look it up in the book, that's where you can find it. Then many Connectes were sorry that Sir Lacote Maltile was gone forth to the adventure. Truly, sighed Sir Launcelot, I cast me to ride after him. So here's Lancelot coming in and saying, dude, guys, you did not live up to the standard here, right? It was shameful of you guys to let that guy take that quest on himself, right? He is probably gonna get killed, right? This quest that he has taken on himself is way above his pay grade, right? It was shameful of you even to let it happen. And notice they're all like, he rebukes them all publicly. And what do they say? You're right. We're sorry. We shouldn't have done that. We feel bad now that we let Sir Lacote Maltile go forth on the adventure. And Lancelot's like, guys, come on now. Don't just sit around being sorry. I'm going to go after him. I'm going to see if I can help this kid, right? Because he is in way over his head. Lancelot doesn't just think the right thing to do. He goes and does it immediately, right? And doesn't just sit around feeling bad that he hadn't done the right thing before. Sir Lancelot, once again, our exemplar. However, having met him and rode along with him a little while, he is interrupted by some correspondence. I love this passage. So this meantime, Sir Tristram is sent by a damosel a letter unto Sir Launcelot, excusing him of the wedding of Isoude le Blanche Minus, and said in the letter, as he was true Connect, he had never ado fleshly with Isoude le Blanche Mines. And passing courteously and gently, Sir Tristram wrote unto Sir Launcelot, ever beseeching him to be his good friend, and unto La Belle Isoud of Cornwall. And then notice he's got to specify the country of the Isoud in question, because like now he's confused the whole Isoud question with his wife. And that Sir Launcelot would excuse him if that ever he saw her. And within short time, by the grace of God, Sir Tristram is said that he will speak with La Belle Isoud, and with him wreaked hastily, with Lancelot wreaked hastily. Then Sir Launcelot departed from the damosel and from Sir La Cote Male Taile for to oversee that letter, and to read another letter unto Sir Tristram. Okay. So yeah, his pen pal catches up with him. Karina says, this is so weird and embarrassing. Yeah. It is really weird. So Tristram is excusing himself. So remember, Sir Lancelot condemned him very firmly, right, for his untruthfulness to his lady. And Tristram says, please forgive me for getting married, but it's okay because I didn't sleep with my wife. That makes it okay. And I'm going to make up to La Belle Isoud real soon. I'm going to go back and talk to her, and I hope to talk to you afterwards. And if you see La Belle Isoud before I do, can you put in a good word for me? Says Tristram. Would you mind? And then Sir Lancelot leaves. By the way, for to oversee that letter. Oversee is a really interesting word here. My theory about that sentence there, for to oversee that letter and to read another letter unto Sir Tristram. I don't think Sir Lancelot is literate. Here's how I'm imagine. This is what I think. This is the story I think behind this. The damsel shows up with a letter from Sir Tristram, and she says to him, Lancelot, I have a letter for you from Sir Tristram. And he says, oh, great. Excuse me, Sir La Cote Male Taile, I have to go get somebody who can read me this letter because I can't read it. And he's also got to get a letter written for Tristram, which he himself quite possibly cannot write, right? So this is why he can't, like, you might ask, if he just needs to read the letter, why doesn't he just stay with, I mean, can't he just be like, hang on, Sir La Cote Male Taile, just give me 5 minutes, I got to read this letter, right? And then, I need to take out my writing desk and write a reply later on. I'll send a reply from the next town, right? As we've talked about, literacy is a much more specialized skill, right? With a much more limited cultural relevance and broad applicability. I think he's leaving him because he's got to go find a clerk who can both help him to oversee that letter. He hasn't read it. Now the narrator is telling us what's contained in it, right? Because the narrator is kind of skipping the middleman here, right? So we don't hear the whole story about how Sir Lancelot goes off and finds a clerk who reads him the letter, and then and then Lancelot helps to write. But he's got this letter which he needs help reading and responding to, I believe, is what that is supposed to mean. It's that word oversee is the one that I think is he needs to actually look over the letter, which he can't do right there and then because he can't read it. Karina's wondering if people tipped their scribes really handsomely to keep their mouths shut about the dirty details of their personal lives. No, that's this is why you generally use go-betweens and you don't send notes as a rule, because no one involved can actually read, and you don't want to involve, the local priest because like awkward. So yeah. And you're right, Catriona. Whatever is the quirk he finds, who's able to read him the letter and write his own, does have some bragging rights. You got to think at the local pub later on. I think that's totally true. Um, Notice again here that we don't get, like, we're not resuming the story of Tristram, and we don't even hear what Lancelot's reply is, right? But we're being reminded that Sir Tristram is still in the doghouse, right? But he's appealing to Lancelot, and Lancelot is at least going to talk to him, right? He's not just ignoring him and moving on. So more on this later, but we have this story continuing in the background here. Okay. Now you'll remember that the lady, Sir La Cote Maltau's lady, was named the damsel maledisant, which of course, as Lil Atomic was translating right away, it means the ill saying lady. It means literally evil speaking, right? Maledisant, evil talking, evil saying. So yeah, she's kind of living up to the part here, right? So the damsel maledisant has found out who Sir Lancelot is, right? Has found out his identity, which, as we know, he tends to like to keep on the down low when he's adventuring. He says, "Who told you?" And she's like, "That other damsel told me." "Blam have she therefore," sighed he, "but her lord Sir Nerovius had told her. But, damsel," sighed Sir Launcelot, "upon this covenant I will ride with you, so that ye will not rebuke this knight Sir La Cote Maltail no more. For he is a good knight, and I doubt not but he shall prove a noble man. And for his sake and pity that he should not be destroyed, I followed him to succour him in this great need." "Ah, Jesu, thank you," sighed the damsel. "For now I will say unto you and to him both," he's right there, of course, "I rebuked him never for none hat that I hated him, but for great love that I had to him, for ever I supposed that he had been too young and too tender of age to take upon him this adventure. And therefore, be my will, I would have driven him away for jealousy that I had of his life. For it may be no young knicht's deed that shall achieve this adventure to the end." "Perdie," said Sir Launcelot, "it is well said of you, and where ye are called the damosel maledisant, I will call you the damosel beaupensant." Okay. So no, she doesn't say everything beautifully. He says, "You have been called the damsel evil speaking. I will call you beautiful thinking," right? You're the damsel of beautiful thoughts. Okay, so yes, Michelle, this is another echo of Gareth's damsel's actions, but notice it's not an exact echo, right? Gareth's response to Lynette's harshness, right? She does say that she was doing it to try to, hoping that he would turn back because she didn't want him killed. He says, "No, but like, I'm glad that you did because it inspired me to better deeds," right? This damsel, the damsel maledisant, is stronger. She loves him herself. Lynette did not, right? She was just the messenger. She was like testing him, right? Maledisant speaks of her jealousy for his life, right? She was trying to save Sir La Cote Maltail's life, just like Lancelot. She had the same thought. Like, he is way too young, way too inexperienced for this adventure, right? How can I stop him? Remember, jealousy means she was like protective of his life, right? That she was jealous of it. It was like in her custody, and she was trying to protect it. So she might be the damsel maledisant, but she's now the damsel biopansant. Notice the names describing who she is and what she does. That might be important too. Check this out. We're almost done here. This is my favorite part. We come to this bridge, this fortress guarding a bridge. And he asks Sir Lancelot to let him go in first. Lancelot, of course, is like, hang on, I'll take care of this. And Sir La Cote Male Taile says, no, let me go in first. So he entered anon, and there met with him 12 brethren. The ton hight Sir Plain de Force, and that other hight Sir Plain de Amoris. And anon they justed with Sir La Cote Male Taile, and Sir La Cote Male Taile smote down Sir Plain de Force, and after he smote down Sir Plain de Amoris. And thon they dressed their shields and sweardes, and bade Sir La Cote Male Taile a licht, and so he did. And there was a dashing and a foining with sweardes, and so they began to assail other full hard, and they gaf Sir La Cote Male Taile many great wounds upon head and breast and upon shoulders. And as he meeked ever among, he gaf sad strokes again. And then the 12 brethren trusted and traversed for to be of both hondes of Sir La Cote Male Taile, but he be fine force and kneekly prowess gat him afore him. So you notice what's happening there? In the fight, he's fighting 1-on-2 here, right? And the 2 brothers try to flank him, right? They try to get on either side of him. So they try to be on both hondes of Sir La Cote Male Taile, right? But by force and by knightly prowess, he gate him afore him, right? He kept them both in front of him. And when he felt him so wounded that he doubled his strokes and gaf them so many wounds that he felled him to the earth and would have slain them had they not yielded them. Okay, so he feels himself to be injured, right? And notes he better finish this quickly or else he's not gonna, right? So he doubles his strokes and he takes them both out. And right so Sir La Cote Male Taile took the best horse that there was of them 3, and so he rode forth his way to the other fortress and bridge. And there he met with the 3rd brother. His name was Sir Plenorius, a full noble knecht. And there they justed together, and either smote other down, horse and man, to the earth. And then they avoided their horses, and dressed their shields and sweardes, and then they gaf many sad strokes. And on while the one knecht was afore on the bridge, and another while the other, and thus they fought 12 hours and more, and never rested, and ever Sir Launcelot and the damosel beheld them. Okay. On the one hand, this is a great adventure, right? And a noble deed on the part of Sir La Cote Male Taile. It is kind of like fighting through levels of a dungeon, Michelle. It's also, of course, reminiscent of Sir Gareth again, right? Fighting his way through the Chromatic Brothers, right? As each brother more strong and more threatening than the one before. Now, and I agree, 2 hours is a super long time to fight, especially after you've already finished a fight with 2 guys at once where you barely beat them and were pretty significantly wounded during the course of it, right? Especially long time in that circumstance. All of this stuff, super relevant, but you notice the other element that we get here? There's something fishy about this fight. Or there's another... Anybody notice anything odd about these knights? What are those first 2 knights named again? Did you notice this? Now, this is, of course, where you will notice already in the damsel's name, this has been useful. Any of you who know any French will be rewarded at various points in Malory. I took French in high school. for no good reason whatsoever, actually, for a disreputable reason. But it turned out to be super useful when I went on to study Middle English. Was super glad that I took French in high school. The names of the first two knights that he fights are Sir Plein de Force and Sir Plein de Amoris, which literally translate Tarlonio, yes, strength and love. And the Plein de, any French scholars? Full of force, plein de. One knight is called full of force and the other full of love. Okay. And they're both knights, and he's fighting both of them at once. And remember their tactics, right? As they try to flank him on either side so that he's divided between the two of them. But he manages to keep them both in front of him and ends up overcoming the both of them, right? Okay. And the third brother? The third brother is less obvious than Plein de Amoris and Plein de Force. What's his name? Plenorius? What's he full of? Dangerous question. What's the third knight full of? A little French, a little Latin. No, he's not full of Oreos. That is not the right answer. I like that answer, but that is not the right answer. Plein de Honorius. He's full of honor. Yeah, exactly, Tarlonio. He's full of honor. So what you notice in this combat, the three brothers that he fights are force, love, and honor, which is kind of like the knightly life, right? These are like 3 points of the, knightly triad here, right? First, he fights force and love, right? Now, force and love try to divide him, right? So like he has to go one way or the other, right? To force or to love. But he managed to keep them. So he managed to fight and overcome the both of them, right? So he overcomes both force and love, but he fights to a standstill with full of honor, right? With honor. What do we do with this? As soon as you see the name, remember Tolkien's comment about being old and wary enough to suspect the presence of allegory? When you've read enough medieval literature, you become wary enough to suspect the presence of allegory in moments like this, right? All you got to do is you got to see. We've already been primed by the the damsel maledisant, right? The damsel who turns out to be named evil speaking when she's been saying all these mean things all the time, right? So we've already been primed for like the name to represent the thing. And now we meet these guys with obviously allegorical names. So what's going on here? Force and love. Those are two elements of the knightly world, right? But neither one of them is the whole story. You don't want to be overcome by either one of those guys, right? If you do, you're a failure. Because imagine what would happen if he lost, right? Sir Lecoq Maltail would have to be taken prisoner, but he would have to submit himself to one of those two. That would be bad, right? If you submit yourself to force, right? If you allow force to overcome you, well, then you become like Sir Bruce sans pity, or you become like Sir Tarquin, right? If you allow love to take over you, then you become like, I don't know what, like Sir Gawain maybe, right? Not like Sir Paris, the knight who, like the damsel raping knight that Sir Lancelot fought, because he doesn't have a love problem exactly. He's got other issues. But if you come like Sir Tristram, yeah, maybe Veronica. That seems a little bit more fair. To be overcome by either one of the, to be dominated by either by force or by love, those are elements of the knightly life, but that's not the whole story. Honor is the third one, and honor is the one who overcomes him, right? But notice what notice what happens when that happens. So they're fighting for 2 hours. This meanwhile, Sir La Cote Male Taile sank reeked down upon the earth. What for wounded and for bled, he make not stand. Then the t'other knight had pity of him, this is Sir Plenorius, and said, Fair knight, dismay you not, for had ye been fresh, then when ye met with me as I was, I wot well that I could not have endured you, and therefore, for your noble deeds of arms, I shall show to you kindness and gentleness all that I may. And forthwithal, this noble knight, Sir Plenorius, took him up in his arms and led him into his tower, and then he commanded him the wine and made to search him and to stop his bleeding wounds. He acts honorably towards him. Notice that like Sir Lamorak, Sir Plenorius does not make Sir La Cote Male Taile submit to him, right? Does not make him beg him for mercy. As Sir La Cote Male Taile just collapses upon the ground, Sir Plenorius just calls it and instead comes to his assistance, just like Lamorak did with Sir Belliance, right? Oh, nice. Josiah says, a knight may live beyond both strength and romance, but he must always measure himself against his honor. Yes, it is against honor. He's not even really beaten. Again, he's not taken prisoner, even by honor, right? But he is treated honorably by honor. Here he finds, so, I mean, clearly, if it's a triad, there's a ranking here. Notice again, it's kind of like the Chromatic Brothers, but instead of just having one color after another with no obvious reason why, like, black should be stronger than, or why green should be stronger than red and why red was stronger than black. That's, I mean, they're just colored, right? And we know that each one is stronger than the one before, like the three Billy Goats Gruff. Here, there's a moral to it. There's a meaning, right? Force and love are strong factors in the knightly life, but if you're going to be a good and noble knight, you need to overcome those, right? You can't just live by those, and you certainly can't be taken prisoner by them. But honor, right? Honor is above them. Honor is the greatest of these three brothers, right? Sir Plenorius, clearly a greater knight than the other two, not to mention more honorable, right, and kindly, and showing both honor and generosity. So he, even though he loses in the end, again, notice how kind of refreshingly not cliched the story of La Cote Male Taile is, right? He doesn't just beat everybody he fights from the beginning, right? He kind of loses more fights than he wins, actually. But in the end, he is victorious, right? He is victorious even in defeat here, as he meets his match by Sir Plenorius and yet is still not taken prisoner by him. And I think this is kind of lovely, and it works out really well. And now, is this just an allegory? No, this like really happened. These are guys that Sir La Cote Male Taile comes up against, right? But we also get to overlay this with a symbolic story, right? With a little allegory of the knightly existence. Jennifer, you're right. The damsel was right. This was too hard for him. Yeah. And yet it didn't end up defeating him completely. And Lancelot is there to come in. And Lancelot comes in and defeats Sir Blenorius and settles everything, right? So Lancelot had his back, and it's all good, right? It's all okay. All right, I'm over time, so I'm going to stop here. I have one more slide, but I'm going to stop even though I only have one more slide because it's a long one. It's the end of the story of Sir Lacote Malatail, but actually that will serve reasonably well as a springboard into the next section. So we'll do that. So I'm going to stop there. In the next so for the next class, which remember is 2 weeks from now, so on the 28th of November, we will come back together. In that time, we will discuss the next section that I have mapped out. I'll also be mapping out the next bits. We'll keep going from here, as I will, keep kind of casting out our path in front of us here as we go. So anyhow, we'll start with the very end of the story of Sir Lacote Malatail, because again, I want to come back to that question of what is Lancelot's role, what is his status in the court. The end of the story of Sir Lacote Malatail I find very interesting in that regard, especially. And then it will be back to the story of Sir Tristram. So off we go. So thanks everybody for joining me. I hope you guys have a good Thanksgiving, and I will be back in 2 weeks. So see you guys later. Good night now.
The Mythgard Academy has been offering in-depth discussions of awesome books and films since 2013, completely free to attend and free to download. If you've enjoyed our discussions and would like to help them continue, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.